painting now. I've checked that everything is where I want it to be, and I'm going to start off by painting the window frame area. This is so that that can dry, and then I can go on to doing another area while that's drying rather. So what I've done is I've mixed a pretty powdery blue, and I've used some white and some cobalt, and I'm going to start very light, and I'm going to just go, let's get some water on my brush, just help. I'm going over the entire window frame. I have rubbed out as much of the pencil marks as I can. Need a little bit of water there, it's drying out quickly. I haven't pre-wet the area because it's not a large area, so I should be able to cover it fairly quickly. So I'm being fairly precise, covering everything. Because what I'm going to do, by starting light, I can then create the three-dimensional shape with more intensity of the same colour. Add a bit more water there. Whoops. Right. Get some crossbars in. A lot of people say, oh, you don't use white in watercolour paints, but I do, because I sometimes like to create a more pastel effect, depending on what I'm painting, of course. Let's coax you up there a bit. Covering it as quick as I can so I don't get too many hard lines. But of course, remember, this is just the starting point. I always think it's helpful to get a bit of paint all over the painting so that you can see where you're going, so to speak. Now, do you see what I mean about this area we talked about in the first lecture? Let me just do that while I see it. There, I haven't put the frame in there because this is going to be my plant area. Now this is where you need to learn a little more about your paints, because if I'd used a very dark frame and then I'd put the frame in under there and wanted to put my plants on top, I might have had difficulty with it, because some paints are darker, more intense and more opaque than others. So this is why planning really is a big part of the job. Can't say it often enough. Now I've got over my edge a bit there, but I'm not going to worry about it, because more likely than not, this is going to be in shadow because my light's coming that way. So whatever paint I put on there is going to cover that. So I'm not too worried about it. So that's giving us a starting point. Now, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to do the wall area, and I have mixed, again, some white, and I've added a bit of Venetian red and a bit of Sennelier yellow. Sennelier yellow is that, I'll show you, I can't get everything in front of the camera at once, that quite dark yellow. But use what you've got, because what I'm looking for is a sort of mortar colour, okay? This is the colour that's going to go all over this area so that I'm in fact creating the mortar, because these little bits here will be darker, these will be darker, these big stones, the lintel, and so what I want, by covering everywhere, I'm giving you the mortar bits between the big stones. So I'm going to take a big brush, some clean water, and I'm going to go all over. I haven't rubbed out much more of the pencil because I know I'm going to be going darker. And you do need to be able to see what I'm doing as well. So now with that, still with the big brush, that's very, very wet. I'm not going to worry, because I'm going to have all sorts of effects on this wall. There's going to be sort of like bits that are chipped off, bits of plaster that's chipped off, there's going to be cracks, there's going to be damage, there's going to be all sorts of stuff going on. So we just want to get a background. And I say, it gives you something to work against. Oops. Let's go over that lintel as well, might as well. That's going to be a lot darker. Okay, so where the plaster is, or the cement, whatever you want to call it, mortar, is in between those stones. That is going to be the colour you'll use. So you're starting light, don't worry, that's green, that'll be darker. You're starting light and you keep going on top. I might as well do that bit as well. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to leave that to dry and come back to it when that's dry. We'll see where we are then. Be doing more work on the window frame, and the wall is going to be great fun to do because we're going to do lots of cracks and little exposed areas. So leave that to dry and return later.